Andor Season 2, Episode 11 is here, and
This is where the fun begins.
K2SO is officially back and better than ever. And not only that, but director Krennic steals the show just a few days before, well, he's force-choked by Vader and dies to his own creation. But at least he's awesome in this episode, and we finally get the reveal of how Cassian Andor knows Galen Erso and the fact that the Empire is building some super weapon at the beginning of Rogue One. As all of that is in this 11th episode, as this is the perfect setup for the finale of Andor. So without further ado, let's break it all down. Episode 11 is titled Who Else Knows? Now that is in reference to the Death Star plans. The craziness has begun to unravel because in episode 10, Lonnie, Luthen's ISB spy, told Luthen that the Empire is making a weapon, that the rebellion on Gorman, the mining of kyber crystals on Jedha, the Imperial base on Scarif, Emperor Palpatine's energy project, all of these things are connected. All of these things are building a super weapon for the Empire. Now, currently, Luthen and Kleya don't know what this weapon is. They don't know it's the Death Star. But episode 10 ended with the death of Luthen Rael. After Dedra tried to confront him in his gallery, he took his own life, sacrificing, as he said in season 1, everything for the rebellion. And that's right where episode 11 picks up. Kleya had just infiltrated this Lina Soh hospital on Coruscant, named after the great Chancellor Lina Soh of the High Republic, and finished the job killing Luthen for good, and taking out a few stormtroopers on the way. As the opening scene of this 11th episode shows a stormtrooper dead on the ground, as Supervisor Hurt has just arrived at the crime scene. Now right away, they think this was a 3-person operation because of the explosions and all the Imperials that have been taken down. But no, it's just Kleya because she's badass. But right away, it's made clear that Hurt is going to try and blame all of this on Dedra. Like most Imperial officers, they're just looking out for themselves, trying to step on others to elevate their own personal goals. And speaking of Dedra, we cut to the ISB headquarters in this interrogation room. Last we saw this was in season 1, where Dedra interrogated Cyril. Oh, how far we've come. Since that happened, those two fell in love, and Cyril has since died at the Gorman massacre, and Dedra clearly hasn't fully recovered from that, throwing all of her chaos and anger into Axis over the last year. And now she's the one that's going to be interrogated. Now, first of all, this might be the greatest scene that Krennic has in Star Wars. In Rogue One, he's not really that badass because his bosses are always mad at him. You got Darth Vader force choking him, and it makes him look like he's not that strong and powerful. And even Tarkin is just one step ahead of him at all times. And by the end of the movie, he takes over the Death Star project and literally kills Krennic with the Death Star. So in this 11th episode, we get to see Krennic at his baddest as he turns off the cameras so that nobody will see this conversation. Because this isn't about Axis. This isn't about Luthen at all. This is about the Death Star. Who else knows? And that's exactly what he asks as soon as he enters this room. To which Dedra responds with, about what? You haven't caught on yet? All she knows is that Lonnie was found dead, but that's not why Krennic is there. He says, take a second. What one single thing would bring me all the way down to this basement? Say it. Say the word.
Say my name.
Dedra responds with, the Death Star. But the craziest part is that other than a post-credit scene at the end of season 1, we haven't seen the Death Star all the way up until this point in episode 11 of season 2, and the amount of people who know about this Death Star that's been in production for over a decade is very, very little. And Dedra is one of those people. And now she seems to be a leak. Krennic informs Dedra that Lonnie had her code cert, access to all the top secret information that Dedra has access to. But Dedra didn't know this, telling Krennic that he must have stolen it from her. To which Krennic responds with, who told you about Galen Erso? Galen was mentioned multiple times in episode 10, and he continues to be mentioned in this 11th episode. As we know from Rogue One, Galen Erso is the architect of the Death Star. He's the one who puts the flaw in the Death Star that allows Luke Skywalker to destroy it with one single X-Wing. But Dedra right now should not know about Galen Erso, and this is where she slipped up. She reveals that several intel bundles were forwarded to her office by mistake, and instead of reporting them, she just hung on to them. All the important information about Jedha, Galen Erso's journals, Dedra had access to them, and yesterday, for 3 hours, Lonnie was looking at them. And that information, as we know, was passed along to Luthen and Kleya. And although Luthen died at the end of episode 10, Clea is still out there. And after Dedra tries to talk her way out of this by explaining that she had to scavenge for this information because she was trying to find out who Axis was and the Empire wasn't giving her all the information that she could have had, Krennic is not having it, telling her if she's not a rebel spy, then she missed her calling. And maybe she did. I mean, Cyril turned from the Empire right before he died. If he survived, maybe he could have turned Dedra as well. But in a last-ditch effort to try and save her own skin, Dedra tells Krennic about Luthen's assistant. But as Krennic leaves the interrogation room, he holds her head and says, "We'll do our best to carry on without you." As Krennic leaves the room and gets word that Luthen is dead. We then cut to Luthen in Clea's super secret safe room on Coruscant, where in episode 10, Clea found in the ceiling an explosive which helped her go kill Luthen, but now she's breaking into a wall where she finds this communication device. Sort of a similar idea to what Bix had on Ferrix, a device that won't be able to be traced by the Empire, where she can send an encrypted code for help, and that code she's sending is going to Yavin. And Yavin is where we go, as we cut to Wilmon walking through the woods, limping, as last we saw him in episode 9, he was almost dead. So even one full year later, he's still recovering. As he arrives back at his tent, Drina, his girlfriend, informs him that there was some sort of buzzing below his bed, a communication device that Luthen, or Clea, gave to Wilmon. She said that it was buzzing about a half hour ago, and in a panic, he takes it to go bring it to Cassian. We then cut to Cassian, Melshi, and K2SO, playing a new game in Star Wars. This game is called Rainza, and it was created by the Andor Art and Graphics Department, inspired by Mahjong and Dominoes. Immediately you realize that the last time that they were in this hut in episode 9, a year ago, Bix was here, and the hut looked a lot different. Now it seems like a bachelor pad with the boys. Seems like Melshi has moved in along with K2SO, as they're drinking and playing card games. But having K2SO back just for these last 2 episodes even is incredible. He is hilarious. But their game gets interrupted as Wilmon comes in with the news. Now back on Coruscant, on the ISB headquarters, Partagaz, Krennic, and Hurt are all in this room. Hurt has figured out what Clea looks like, and now all they have to do is find her. Krennic is telling him that he will put this image all over Coruscant. You'll search every comm, every transit port, nor will there be any limits to your efforts. In failure to find this girl will put you in the ever-lengthening ISB Death March. Now, I don't know what the ISB Death March is, but death marches in real life occurred in the 1940s in Germany, as prisoners in those German camps were forced to march very far lengths in the bitter cold without food or water, and those who couldn't keep up were shot. So I'm guessing this is sort of a parallel to the real world yet again with this Andor series, and Krennic is talking about something similar to that. So what he's pretty much saying is that you have to find this girl at all costs. And that's when Partagaz chimes in and says, "Tell everyone that she has a disease. She broke out of a hospital. She has an infectious condition and is a threat to everyone she makes contact with. And she must be found before thousands die." Supervisor Hurt has his mission and he gets up and leaves. And the following conversation is very foreshadowing-y. Foreshadowing? Foreshadowing the future. As Partagaz reminds Krennic that the Death Star should have been done by now. And it's a miracle that we've kept it quiet for this long. It's been over a decade. To which Krennic responds with, "We are moments away, days away." And as we know, he's not wrong. The events of Rogue One take place just a few days after this conversation, and we see the Death Star in action. To which Partagaz says, "Save that for Palpatine." And as Krennic is about to leave, Partagaz says, "Best of luck to both of us." These two will never meet again, as Krennic dies to the Death Star on Scarif. Now we cut back to Yavin as K2SO is telling the boys how this is such a bad idea. Whoever's on the other end of this communication device could be trying to trick them into a trap. It's a trap! And Cassian doesn't believe that anything really even happened. And just as they're about to lose hope, Clea sends a message yet again. And that message can only be deciphered by Cassian. And he immediately tells K2 to go power up the U-Wing. The only problem is, Yavin nowadays isn't just some place you can come and go from. The rebellion needs to stay hidden. And Cassian going off on wild, grand adventures is not really helping that out. And as they escape Yavin 4 in their U-Wing, we see General Draven just as upset as he was last week when Cassian did the same thing. Some things just never change. And as Cassian, Melshi, and K2 are about to jump into hyperspace, K2 says, "I've been counting how many times you've disobeyed orders. Would you like to know how many? 17. And as they jump into hyperspace, it becomes 18. Back on Coruscant, Dedra has seen better days. She's now in a prison, as Supervisor Herc comes to visit her. He's confused as to why such a high-level official like Krennic is involved in any of this, and he's hoping to come to Dedra for some advice. And Dedra is actually a big help. She says pull up all the old Axis files. There was that radio on Ferrix that Bix used, and even Anto Krager from Season 1 also used a very similar radio. They used old frequencies, pulse codes, so that's probably what Clea is using as well. And well, Dedra's spot on here, because that's exactly what's going on. As Supervisor Herc goes back to the gallery, they find out that the transmitting tower is still operational. Even though Luthen destroyed a lot of the stuff in the gallery, the antenna they use on the building next door is still operational. And as they are figuring that out, Cassian, Melshi, and K2 arrive in the space outside of Coruscant. And here it's revealed that K2 has been to Coruscant before. He was in a parade where there was over 200 KX units. Even Emperor Palpatine was there. So K2 gets to meet Emperor Palpatine before we even get to see him in 2 seasons of Andor? That's just not fair. But as Cassian is looking at the machine that Wilmon gave him, and the Empire is currently looking at the switchboard at the gallery, Clea sends another message. And this not only allows Cassian and the others to find her, but it also allows the Empire as well. And just as we see the U-Wing land by the super secret safe house, we see that the ISB is also on its way. Partagaz is running this whole operation from the headquarters as he turns off all communication in the area. All non-essential frequencies have been shut off. Now, K2SO stayed with the ship, but Cassian and Melshi went out with earpieces. Sadly, those communication devices no longer work, so they're on their own. And as Cassian is knocking on the door, the Empire is sending out a signal so that Supervisor Herc can narrow down where this device is. And as Clea finally opens the door, she says, "It would be you, wouldn't it?" And Cassian asks, "Where's Luthen?" It's pretty heartbreaking that Cassian wasn't there for when Luthen died. When you think about it, he also wasn't there for when Marva died either. And if you want to make it even worse, he wasn't there when Bix left in episode 9. Luthen meant so much to Cassian. He was really a mentor and the reason that he joined the rebellion and became this leader that he is. And now he's gone. But Clea starts to tell them all the information they need to know. Palpatine's energy project is not an energy project. They're building a weapon. Gorman, that was a front. Scarif, Jedha, the obsession with Kyber, it's all been about this big weapon. She even tells him about Galen Erso. And this explains why in the opening scene for Cassian Andor in Rogue One, when he's in this alleyway with Tivik, and Tivik mentions Galen Erso, Cassian knows who that is. Because up until this point, he had never heard that name before. Now he has. Clea is getting very upset. She needs Cassian to believe him. Luthen died for this, but she does not want to go to Yavin 4. She knows how they think about Luthen over there, but Cassian reassures her that she'll be safe there. While this conversation is going on, the ISB is making their way upstairs, and K2SO is coming to the rescue, as we get to see him take down a bunch of Imperial troopers. But the episode ends with the ISB walking down the hallway towards the door, leaving us on a cliffhanger for episode 12 where the fight will commence. And that ends episode 11. Now, honestly, this is really the perfect setup for that finale, which we'll get to, and I'm probably making that breakdown video right now if it's not out already. But this episode in particular really gave us the best Krennic that we've ever seen. That interrogation scene between him and Dedra is fan-freaking-tastic. But this episode is truly the bridge episode, getting us from that Luthen arc where he dies in episode 10 to the finale, setting us up with a big old cliffhanger. Now, this episode I give an 8.8 out of 10. The Krennic stuff alone is a 10 out of 10, but it really just doesn't give us enough in other places. It is just a bridge episode. However, because of these 3 episode releases, if you put all 3 of these episodes together, this score would be a lot higher. But just because this episode is standing alone in this breakdown video, I give it an 8.8 out of 10. Tell me what you think in the comments section below. What do you rate this episode? What did you think of Krennic? And isn't it the greatest thing to have K2SO back in Star Wars? Enjoy it while it lasts, because it's over after episode 12. Tell me what you think in the comment section below. And if you haven't watched it already, go watch my breakdown video for episode 10 in this video right here. There's a lot of Easter eggs that you might have missed.